Hey, well, today I'm angry at Martin Luther King Day, and I'm not actually mad at the day itself. I'm mad at the promise that it used to represent that we seem to have forgotten. Martin Luther King Day celebrates the activist Martin Luther King Jr., who was actually born Michael King and whose name was changed to Martin Luther King Jr. when he was already 28 years old. But that is by the by. The main issue is this is a fellow who grew up almost 100 years ago and was very instrumental in gaining civil rights for black people in this country. But the thing to remember is Martin Luther King was not solely focused on black people. As a matter of fact, later in his life, when he addressed the issue of reparations, he felt that the disadvantaged of all races should get reparations to try to level the playing field, not just black people. I think that where we've gone so wrong today is that everything is still race focused. I mean, the Civil Rights Act passed in 1964, that's almost 60 years ago, and we still haven't resolved the issue of race in this country. And now the pendulum is swinging all the way to the other side, where now white people are having racist tactics employed against them. And you can always argue that the side that is seeking power is justified in seeking power. If it's the white people, it could be that's the way it's always been. That's the way things work. If it's black people, you could say, well, it's just we need to make compensation for years of disadvantage. Either side can argue that they should be given benefits, but the problem is that anytime any group is treated differently to the other group, you have racism. I don't buy into the argument that only white people can be racist. If you're a white person and you think that black people should not be given the same opportunities that you have, if you're a black person who thinks that white people should not be given the same opportunities that you are given, you are a racist. You can't make the argument that we need to make up for lost time, we need to redo history, we need to compensate people for what happened in the past. We're talking about people who were never in this country compensating people who were never disadvantaged. Martin Luther King achieved great things. He gave his I Gave a Dream speech in 1963, and only 1 year later in 1964, the Civil Rights Act was passed. And the Civil Rights Act forbids discrimination on the basis of sex or race. How have we come to this point where 55 years later, we are still having the discussion about whether race should be mentioned in any kind of program? How is it that 55 years later, we're still discussing race? We still have race as a factor. Just recently, I think I heard President-elect Biden say that there was going to be a new round of stimulus payments, but that they were only going to be going to black people and Hispanic people, not to white people. This is racism. I don't care if you think that injustices were done in the past. There were definitely injustices done in the past to many groups of people, blacks, Polish, Irish. The history of this country is replete with examples of one group taking advantage of the other. But the fact is that today we are attempting to move forward. We're attempting to unite and ignore race. We cannot ignore race. If people say, I am black, I am white, I am Hispanic, then race is an identifying factor. And what really hurts is when race is used to determine who should be given opportunities, who should be denied opportunities. 55 years ago, Martin Luther King Jr. stood up for people who were disadvantaged, for people who were not being given the same opportunities as everybody else. And 55 years later, we're doing exactly the same thing in reverse. Black people are saying that because of years of white privilege, that white people should now be disadvantaged so that black people can make strides. Black people have made strides. Women have made strides. These are both groups that historically have been disadvantaged, and today you find them at the highest level in industry, sport, finance, you name it, entertainment. The fact that racism is alive and well does not speak well of Dr. Martin Luther King's legacy. We need to remember that this is a guy who focused on non-violent opposition to injustice, and it seems that injustice can be clearly defined as one group being treated differently to another group. I certainly think that Martin Luther King Jr. had moral and justice and righteousness on his side when he stood up for black people who were disadvantaged at the time, were given less legal rights. But today there is opportunity for all, and certainly there is a poor, there is an underclass, and perhaps they should be helped. Perhaps the playing field should be leveled so that people at the very bottom strata of society have a chance to rise, at least to middle class, if not to upper class levels. But the fact that we're still looking at race, the fact that we're still considering whether black people and white people should be treated differently under the law is outrageous, and I'm sure it would sadden Dr. Martin Luther King's heart were he alive to see it today. Please, let's wake up.